It might seem a little surreal or like a touch of vertigo. All in 1 week, friends like Canada are villains, and villains like North Korea are, in the words of President Trump, doing so much for us. We talked to former Florida Congressman Patrick Murphy.
That's a microcosm of, I think, the fear for a lot of Republicans in the House and the Congress right now that are upset, will tell me off the record, will call me and tell me how frustrated they are with this president on the budget, on the spending, on the tax bill, on the trade war, on the handling of North Korea, you name it, but they don't have the courage to stand up because they're so worried about their next election and losing. That's not good for our democracy. It is better, I think, for people to speak their mind and do what they think is best. We're not seeing that right now because when you poke the bear in this case, oftentimes it's going to come back to bite you. It is better when we have a balance of powers where everyone can speak their own mind.
If you talk to folks around here, either Democrats are tearing their hair out about the Russia investigation and what they see in terms of the president and the administration and some of the ethical things that are being talked about every single day. Or if you talk to Republicans, they don't care about the Russia investigation, and they are pleased that a conservative agenda is really moving forward in Washington. It is almost surreal to folks who live in the middle in terms of the nature of our politics at this point.
You're right, and people are in their lanes more and more, and I attribute that in a few main issues that have led to that. The gerrymandering, where people are put in a certain bucket because of the district they live in, and they get a representative because of that. The money that's being spent to manipulate where people are viewing, but then the media, and I'm not saying you, Alan, but you know, whether that's the Fox or the MSNBC is becoming more polarized and rigid, or social media, or Facebook and online, where people only get one side of an issue, not the other, and they're not getting that middle lane, so people are becoming more rigid in their beliefs. That's dangerous for our country, I think, and something I hope we can move away from, and I think is going to lead to a third party perhaps emerging because of that frustration.
And let me just ask you about the events this week in terms of the summit with North Korea. Number one, was this a major breakthrough, as the president would suggest? And number two, if you talk to a lot of your Republican friends, they'll say to you, look, this is evidence that the president is doing what no other president before him could do. It's almost like Nixon going to China.
That's outrageous comment, of course, because the Republicans were the first to jump on President Obama when he even mentioned the thought of meeting with one of the Kims or meeting any sort of dictator without preconditions. I am one for diplomacy. I think it's great that people should, find that middle ground, see if there's a conversation, agreement to be had to avoid war. That is good. However, for the President of the United States to go meet with Kim Jong-un without any preconditions, to put him on the same pedestal as the American president, on the heels of bashing the G7 and going after our greatest allies, is completely outrageous for I think any Republican or Democrat, but any American leader to do. This was good theater. That's exactly what it was. The president is running this White House like a reality TV show. You see the choreography of all the meetings and the signings and the press around this, and it's on and it's off. So I hope it leads to something, but so far North Korea has won this first step. They are getting relief with Americans not doing military action and trials with the South Koreans. President Trump is praising their leader. This is someone who has killed thousands and detained thousands of people, including Americans, yet he's being called a talented, great negotiator by our president. So they won this first step. I hope America makes up some ground. I hope the Congress, Republican and Democrat alike, stand up to make sure that they're involved in any deal going forward, because verification is critical.
Imagine for a moment a Democrat and Republican running together on the same ticket for Florida governor. It was an idea that intrigued a lot of folks. Former Congressman Patrick Murphy and David Jolly were considering it, but as Murphy tells us, there were just too many obstacles.
And there was a lot of people, in fact, pushing us to do this. This wasn't our idea, actually. This was some people had seen our town hall, had seen us talking about why Congress is so broken, why politics isn't working nowadays. And they said, hey, this might be a new idea, a Republican and a Democrat coming together to solve problems, giving everybody a seat at the table. While I think it's a great idea, and I hope it happens one day, I didn't have that inside, feeling in my gut that this was the right thing to do at this time.
But you did some polling which seemed to indicate that if you chose to do this, you would do well. So if it wasn't the polling, was it the incredible amount of money that you would need to raise.
You know, the polls are really good, as you indicated, and the money was surprisingly good. However, one of the problems that I always outline with politics nowadays is the money. A lot of the money exists on the two extremes, the far left and the far right. So when you're trying to find that middle lane and bring a Republican and Democrat together, a lot of the typical donors say, I don't know if I'm going to be involved in that. Also, when you have 6 people in a race, you give a lot of people excuses not to contribute or get involved. It's easier for them to say, hey, I'm going to wait till after the primary. So we were facing a little bit of that, but I believe we had the resources to be very competitive in this race. It really just came down to that inside feeling where there was quite a few hurdles to get through, and this late in the game, everything's got to go right. And I didn't have that desire.
You mentioned that it's a crowded field, including Phil Levine, who has spent a tremendous amount of his own money to advertise around the state, and the latest polls show that he is leading in the race. But you are endorsing Gwen Graham, the former congresswoman from the Tallahassee area, the former daughter of the senator and the governor. I know you served with her in Congress, but if you're a Democrat and the bottom line is you want to win the governor's mansion, why support Gwen Graham over Phil Levine?
I think Gwen Graham has the best chance to be governor in Florida. I think most importantly, she'll do the best job as governor. To me, that's what matters the most. And I did serve with Gwen, and that is important to me, as you mentioned. That friendship matters. Her dad and my family go back years. Her dad, Senator Graham, was with me on primary day and general election day with a sign in his hand, helping me campaign. So we spent some valuable time together, and I really respect her leadership and think she would hit the ground running and be the best governor for Florida.
We talked to a lot of Republicans and Democrats around here. There are a lot of Democrats in the Sarasota, Manatee area who are supporting Phil Levine. They're saying that his campaign is focused, that it's directed, and even though there's a lot of affinity for Gwen Graham and her dad, they're not seeing that yet with this campaign.
I've got nothing against Phil Levine, nothing against Andrew Gillum or Chris King or Jeff Green for that matter. I've gotten to know them all for various reasons, and at the end of the day, I think any of those Democrats would do a better job than the Republican after what we've seen with Rick Scott over the last 8 years. However, I think, and what you see with Phil Levine, why people maybe know him is because he spent some money. Back to the money question we were just talking about. He spent $8, $9, $10 million of his own money to get that name ID up. Gwen has just now started spending money. So there's a difference in the polls because of that name ID. Once Gwen starts to spend money, as people start to watch these debates and tune in a little bit more, I think you're going to see Gwen take the lead. But also, let's not forget, in all those polls, Gwen Graham only has a name ID comparable to the other candidates, but about 50% of the voters are undecided. They don't know who any of these folks are, have no name ID for any of them. So I think in the next 2 months, you're going to see a lot of changes.
Thanks to former Congressman Patrick Murphy for joining us.